In the summer of 1967, Los Angeles was simmering with more than just California heat. The martial arts world was buzzing with a controversy that would soon explode into one of the most legendary encounters in fighting history. At the center of it all was Joe Louis, 6'3", 210 pounds of pure muscle, national karate champion with an unblemished record of 32 consecutive victories. He had just made a declaration that would echo through every dojo, gym, and training hall in America. He claimed he was faster than Bruce Lee. What happened next would shatter everything Joe Louis thought he knew about speed, power, and martial arts mastery. The champion's arrogance. Joe Louis wasn't just another tournament fighter with delusions of grandeur. He was the real deal, a legitimate fighting machine who had bulldozed his way through every opponent foolish enough to step into the ring with him. His record spoke for itself: 32 wins, 0 losses, with most of his victories coming by way of devastating knockouts that left spectators stunned and opponents questioning their life choices. Standing at 6'3", with a frame packed with 210 pounds of combat-honed muscle, Louis moved through the martial arts world like a force of nature. His sidekick had earned legendary status for putting more than a dozen competitors to sleep. His fists moved with the speed and precision of a striking cobra. In the American karate circuit, Joe Louis wasn't just a champion, he was the undisputed king. So when a journalist from a specialized martial arts magazine asked Louis what he thought about Bruce Lee, the Chinese instructor gaining fame in Hollywood for his revolutionary demonstrations, Louis didn't hold back. The interview took place in Louis's training facility, surrounded by the trophies and accolades that told the story of his dominance. "Bruce Lee is nothing more than a showman," Louis declared, his arms crossed over his massive chest as he leaned back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who had never tasted defeat. "He does pretty tricks for the cameras, but in a real fight, my speed and power would crush him in less than 30 seconds. Louis paused, his eyes gleaming with the certainty that only comes from years of unopposed victory. "I have faced the best fighters in the country, and none have lasted more than 2 minutes against me." This Bruce Lee character might impress movie audiences with his demonstrations, but I'd like to see how his fancy footwork holds up against real American fighting power. The words were published verbatim, and they spread through the martial arts community like wildfire. In 1967, Bruce Lee wasn't yet the global cinema legend the world would later worship. He was simply an instructor with revolutionary ideas about combat, a man who had begun questioning traditional forms and developing his own system called Jeet Kune. But among serious martial artists, his reputation was already formidable. The invitation, when Louis's inflammatory statements reached Bruce Lee's ears, his reaction surprised everyone who knew him. There was no anger, no defensive posturing, no public rebuttal. Instead, Bruce simply smiled with that characteristic calm that both fascinated and unsettled those around him. He was giving a private lesson in his modest Chinatown gymnasium when one of his students nervously showed him the magazine article. The student expected to see fury, indignation, or at least some desire for revenge. Instead, Bruce carefully folded the magazine and set it on a nearby table, his dark eyes reflecting a mixture of amusement and quiet determination. "Master, are you going to respond to this?" the student asked, still anticipating some explosion of wounded pride. Bruce's response was delivered with the philosophical depth that would later make him famous. "I do not need to respond with words. Words are wind. Truth is demonstrated through actions." That afternoon, Bruce did something that caught everyone off guard. He picked up the telephone and called directly to the gymnasium where Joe Louis trained. The conversation was brief but significant. Bruce wasn't calling to issue challenges or trade insults. Instead, he made an invitation that left the karate champion completely perplexed. "I have heard that you are the best," Bruce said, his tone courteous but carrying an undertone of steel. "I would like you to come to my gymnasium this Saturday afternoon, not to fight, but to train together. I believe we could both learn something from each other. What do you say?" Louis, taken completely by surprise, felt his ego inflate even further. He interpreted the invitation as an admission of inferiority, as if Bruce Lee were seeking his approval or recognizing his superiority. Without a moment's hesitation, he accepted, already envisioning the perfect opportunity to publicly demonstrate that Bruce Lee was all flash and no substance. The gathering storm Saturday arrived with the suffocating heat typical of a California summer. Bruce Lee's gymnasium was a study in humble functionality, located on the second floor of an aging building in the heart of Chinatown. It contained no luxurious equipment or gleaming mirrors like the commercial gyms that catered to Hollywood's fitness-conscious elite. Just an open space with a wooden floor worn smooth by countless hours of training. Some heavy bags hanging from the ceiling and basic equipment that prioritized function over form. When Joe Louis entered, accompanied by 3 of his most loyal students who served as his entourage and witnesses, his expression radiated total confidence. He wore a traditional karate gi, perfectly white and starched to crisp perfection, with his black belt tied with the precision of someone who understood that appearance often preceded reputation. Every movement he made transmitted power and dominance. He was the perfect image of an undefeated champion entering what he considered enemy territory. Bruce Lee waited for him in the center of the gymnasium, dressed in simple black pants and barefoot. His bare torso revealed compact, defined musculature that appeared almost slight compared to Louis's massive frame. The difference in their physical presence was striking. Louis looked like a gladiator built for destruction, while Bruce appeared more like a scholar who happened to be in excellent shape. Around them, approximately 15 people had gathered. Students of Bruce, some local instructors, and curious onlookers who had heard whispered rumors about this unprecedented encounter. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation and tension. "Thank you for coming," Bruce said, extending his hand with genuine respect that seemed to surprise Louis. Louis shook the offered hand firmly, perhaps too firmly, as if wanting to demonstrate his strength from the very first moment of contact. "No problem," he replied with a tone that dripped condescension. "I was curious to see what you could teach me." The dismissive attitude didn't go unnoticed by anyone in the room. Several of Bruce's students exchanged meaningful glances, but their master remained impassive, maintaining that tranquil smile that never seemed to leave his face regardless of circumstances. "The test begins. Let us begin with something simple," Bruce proposed, his voice carrying the authority of someone completely comfortable in his own domain. "I would like you to try to hit me. Just one direct strike with all your speed and power. I will not counterattack. I will only move to evade it." Louis let out a short, arrogant laugh that echoed off the gymnasium walls. "Are you sure? I don't want to hurt you in your own gymnasium." "Do not worry about me," Bruce responded, positioning himself in a relaxed posture with his hands down, appearing almost unprepared for what was coming. Joe Louis settled into his perfect combat stance, every muscle in his body coiled and ready. His years of training had refined his technique until it became devastatingly effective. When he launched a direct punch, the sound of air being displaced was audible from several meters away. He had knocked out grown men with single blows using this exact technique. Louis took a deep breath, concentrating with the focus of a master craftsman about to demonstrate his finest work. He wanted this strike to be memorable. He wanted everyone in that room to witness the difference between a true champion and an overrated instructor. He tensed his muscles, visualized the perfect trajectory, and launched his fist with all the speed and power his years of disciplined training had developed. What happened in the next 2 seconds defied all logic and expectation. Louis's fist cut through the air with impressive velocity, directed straight toward Bruce Lee's face with the precision of a guided missile. But when the blow should have connected, when Louis should have felt the satisfying impact of flesh and bone, Bruce simply wasn't there anymore. It wasn't a desperate dodge or a clumsy scramble for safety. Bruce's body seemed to flow like water around Louis's attack, sliding laterally with a fluid grace that appeared to defy physics. Louis's fist passed harmlessly through empty air, striking nothing but the space where Bruce's head had been an instant before. But that wasn't the most disturbing part of the experience. In the same flowing movement that had taken Bruce away from Louis's attack, Bruce had repositioned himself and placed his own open hand barely 2 centimeters from the karate champion's exposed throat. It wasn't a strike, it was a silent demonstration of vulnerability, a crystal clear message that if Bruce had chosen to attack instead of simply evade, the encounter would already be over. Louis stepped back, his eyes wide with shock and disbelief. His brain struggled to process what had just occurred. He had launched one of his fastest, most powerful strikes, a technique that had ended fights and careers, and not only had it failed to connect, but he had been left completely exposed to a counterattack that never materialized. Again, Bruce said simply, returning to his relaxed posture with the calm patience of a teacher working with a struggling student. 6 attempts at reality. Lewis's wounded pride converted into furious determination. This time he wasn't going to fail. This time he would prove that his reputation was built on substance, not luck. He launched a devastating combination jab, cross, hook, 3 strikes in rapid succession, each one carrying enough power to finish an ordinary opponent. Bruce Lee moved like water flowing around immovable rocks. Each of Lewis's strikes found nothing but air, while Bruce's responses appeared at vital points on the champion's body. The throat, the solar plexus, the temple, never making contact, but positioning with surgical precision to demonstrate complete domination. After the second failed combination, Lewis was breathing harder, not from physical exhaustion, but from the crushing weight of frustrated expectations. He launched his third attack with even more aggression, pouring his considerable strength and speed into techniques that had never failed him before. The result was identical. Bruce flowed around the attacks like smoke, appearing and disappearing in Lewis's peripheral vision, always positioning his hands at critical striking points without ever following through. By the 4th attempt, sweat was beginning to bead on Lewis's forehead despite the air-conditioned gymnasium. His pride was taking a systematic beating that was far more brutal than any physical punishment could have been. The 5th and 6th attempts were exercises in futility. Lewis threw everything he had: his most polished techniques, his devastating power, his legendary speed, and came away with nothing but the humbling realization that he had been fighting shadows while remaining completely vulnerable to counterattacks that existed only as gentle reminders of his helplessness. After 6 comprehensive failures, the national karate champion stood in the center of the gymnasium, breathing hard and staring at Bruce Lee with an expression that mixed disbelief with the first stirrings of genuine respect. "Do you want to know why you cannot touch me?" Bruce asked, his voice completely free of mockery or triumph. His tone carried the authority of a teacher who genuinely wanted to educate rather than humiliate. Lewis, his pride shattered but his mind opening for perhaps the first time in years, nodded silently. "The education, you are telegraphing every movement," Bruce explained, approaching with the measured steps of someone completely confident in his safety. "Your strikes are powerful, yes, fast too, but you announce each one before you launch it." Bruce gently touched Lewis's shoulder. "You tense here before you strike." He indicated the champion's hips. "You shift your weight here." Finally, he pointed to Lewis's eyes. "And you focus here. By the time your fist begins to move, I already know exactly where it's going to go." Bruce stepped back several paces and continued his explanation. "You have trained your body to be a perfect machine, and in many ways you have succeeded. But that perfection has become your limitation. Every movement follows a pattern, an established form. In traditional karate, that consistency is considered a virtue, but in real combat, it becomes a weakness that an experienced opponent can exploit." The silence in the gymnasium was profound. Everyone present understood they were witnessing something far more significant than a simple demonstration. They were observing the moment when an undefeated champion discovered that his understanding of martial arts had been fundamentally incomplete. "Now," Bruce said with that smile that had remained constant throughout the entire encounter, "let me show you something else." Bruce positioned himself in front of one of the heavy bags, a 150-pound monster that had absorbed countless hours of punishment from serious fighters. He stood barely 2 centimeters from the bag, close enough that a normal punch would be impossible due to lack of space for proper technique. Then, without any visible preparatory movement, without drawing back his arm or rotating his hips in an obvious manner, Bruce struck. The sound was like controlled thunder in the enclosed space. The heavy bag folded around Bruce's fist, absorbing an impact that seemed impossible given the minimal distance involved. But what truly stunned Joe Louis wasn't the power, it was the speed. The movement had been so fast that Louis, who prided himself on being one of the quickest strikers in American karate, had barely perceived it happening. "This is called the 1-inch punch," Bruce explained with the patient tone of a professor delivering a lecture. "It's not about brute muscular force or even pure speed. It's about efficient energy transfer, using the entire body as a coordinated unit to release maximum power without the preparatory movements that telegraph your intentions to an opponent. The transformation for the next 2 hours, Bruce worked with Joe Louis in what could only be described as a master class in advanced martial arts concepts. It wasn't a traditional lesson filled with formal techniques and rigid structures. Instead, it was a genuine transmission of knowledge from one serious martial artist to another. Bruce demonstrated how every unnecessary movement represented a lost opportunity for efficiency. He showed Louis how economy of motion could multiply effectiveness, how the rigid adherence to traditional forms could serve as both a foundation and a prison, and how true speed wasn't just about moving fast, but about eliminating the telegraph signals that warned opponents of incoming attacks. Louis, to his enormous credit, absorbed every lesson with the humility of a genuine beginner. His ego had been systematically dismantled, but something far more valuable had taken its place, a sincere hunger to learn and evolve beyond his current limitations. The transformation was visible to everyone in the gymnasium. The arrogant champion who had entered that afternoon was gone, replaced by a student eager to understand concepts that existed beyond his previous experience. As the session drew to a close and Louis prepared to leave, Bruce placed a hand on the bigger man's shoulder with genuine respect. "You have extraordinary talent," Bruce said sincerely. "Your speed and power are real assets, not illusions. But now you understand that there are levels of knowledge beyond what you had previously imagined. The question is, what are you going to do with this new understanding?" Joe Louis looked Bruce Lee directly in the eyes and, for the first time in years, smiled with authentic humility rather than confident superiority. "I'm going to learn," he said simply. "If you'll accept me as a student, I want to train with you." The legacy. That Saturday afternoon marked the beginning of one of the most productive master-student relationships in martial arts history. Joe Louis became one of Bruce Lee's first private students, evolving from a powerful fighter into one of the most technically sophisticated champions of his generation. Years later, Louis would reflect on that pivotal day. "I learned the difference between being good and being great." Bruce was operating on a completely different level. It wasn't just his speed, it was his understanding of combat's fundamental principles. Louis continued, "I was looking at martial arts through a narrow window. Bruce taught me to see the complete picture. True mastery isn't about perfecting one approach, it's about understanding the principles that make any approach effective." The story became legendary throughout the martial arts community as a testimony to the power of humility and willingness to learn. Louis never hid what happened that day, becoming one of Bruce Lee's most articulate defenders. 6 attempts, 2 hours, 1 transformed champion. Sometimes the greatest victories teach us we still have mountains left to climb.